everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and a crazy thing happened today at TCO Performance Center for the Minnesota Vikings. Absolutely wild. We haven't seen this in a really, really long time. The Vikings got positive news on their injury report. I know. It's something that we're not used to, and we're going to have to change the entire tenor of the show to analyze good news on the injury report. First of all, Andrew Van Ginkel practiced in full, and what a difference a Van Ginkel can make to this defense. But also, to go along with that, JJ McCarthy practiced in full for the first time since September 14th, maybe the first time since he got hurt, whatever the date of that was, that he got injured against the Atlanta Falcons. This was the first time that on an injury report, he was listed as a full participant. So we had a chance to speak with JJ McCarthy today about just the last 5-6 weeks for him, what he's been through, what he's tried to take away, and how the ankle feels right now. And if you're seeing the headline, then you realize what he said. He said that the ankle feels, quote, amazing. And he described it, I'll play you the clip in a bit. So he described it as not being ready for last Thursday, but said that time has helped him get to the point where he is ready to go, and we can move past all the soft benching discussion and all that other stuff about whether the Vikings actually wanted Carson Wentz to start and yada, yada, yada. Well, I promise you, everybody in the organization wants to see JJ McCarthy, and JJ McCarthy wants to be on the football field. And you could tell from him today, just coming off of a practice, he had, I think Alec Lewis described it as just like good spirit or an energy to him that the last couple times we've talked to him, it's been, hey, how are you feeling? Are you okay? How are you dealing with all this? And you could just, I think, see the excitement in his face to get back on the field and start playing again. And I can imagine that a lot of your faces look like that as well. I forgot to mention the show presented by FanDuel as always. And let me get you the FanDuel question of the day. Then we can get into what JJ McCarthy had to say. I wrote an article about trying to analyze what it should look like with JJ McCarthy back on the field, where they need to improve in order to have success with McCarthy. And then Carson Wentz talked. Kevin O'Connell talked more about the Carson Wentz Thursday night injury situation, so we could dive into that as well. And old Purple Insider got aggregated through the roof, which we'll discuss also. But here's your FanDuel question of the day. JJ McCarthy's over-under for this game is 212.5 yards. What do you need to see from JJ McCarthy to feel like he had a good game? I want you to give me one specific thing. So I gave you the over-under. That's a stat line. Doesn't have to be a stat. Just give me one specific thing from JJ McCarthy for you to walk away and say, you know what? Because I saw this, I think JJ McCarthy had a good game. Or you think that this is going to trend in the right direction because you saw X, Y, and Z. So that is your FanDuel question of the day. But McCarthy talked to us for a couple of minutes out there after practice. And Kevin Seifert asked him just what this last 5 or 6 weeks has been like. And here's what he had to say.
It's the same, I think, during this whole 6-week process. Like, how do you kind of think about your first year and a half in the NFL? Like, what, it's been like for you?
Oh, roller coaster. Definitely not something that I've been used to playing football in my career. And, it's something that, you don't know now, but you'll know later. God always has a plan for every single one of us, and I have full faith in that. And, I'm just continuing to trust my process because I'm confident in the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis are the right things. So obviously you adapt and you evolve that process, but you can't lose sight of, what got you here and what's going to get you to where you want to go. So, yeah, it's been a roller coaster, that's for sure.
You think at all about this week as if you're starting over in some senses, or? Is
I
this all
think
been
there's
kind of
a reset button, essentially, just being 6 weeks down, and I feel like there's a lot that I learned on just playing the game of football in the next level. This is my second year. I'm still learning so much, and all that time is not time that's wasted. So yeah, it's a little bit of a reset, but just coming from a different perspective.
Yeah, I really like the way that he talked about that reset button. Of course, he's learned a lot along the way from last year watching Sam Darnold and the recovery and going through all that, and all that he learned about the offensive system and how the NFL works. And then this year, he gets into some games. He starts to see what it looks like when you're out there. And I don't mean to make fun of the virtual reality. Like, I'm sure that it has merit and I'm sure it's been useful, but it's not the same as having James Pierce or something running after you and trying to slam into your face. It's just not something that you can really, in any way, try to simulate actually being on the field and what that pressure is like and what that speed is like and what those hits actually feel like. Those are things that he got to see in the first two games, but it does really feel like the start of a new for JJ McCarthy. And almost in a way, he went 1-1 in his first two games. I thought he did a lot of good things, and you can go back and watch the JT O'Sullivan breakdown of the game against Chicago that really shows that he did some good things that were not rewarded. There were drops, there were some miscues from wide receivers, there were some blocking issues at times, and even the pick six that he threw, the breakdowns of that had kind of suggested that maybe the route could have been a little better, or whatever it might have been. Or maybe the corner just made an amazing play and jumped it, and if he had missed it, it would have gone for who knows how much. All those things, right? The Chicago game, I think we all agreed, was a very decent game from McCarthy and a great quarter that he played in the fourth quarter. He made some all-star type of plays in that game. The second game was a disaster. We've talked about that for all the reasons why it was a disaster. O'Connell today went into why he thought, going into that game, that he had played well enough against Chicago, and even if he didn't have adequate amounts of practice, that he felt like, hey, man, this kid just won, that game against Chicago. Just because he's missed some practice, we can't have him sit on the bench after that. So they put him in, but maybe learned a lot from that experience of having things go wrong against Atlanta. But those almost feel like, because there's such a separation, almost like a preseason. I mean, it counted, and it's in the official NFL record books. It's not like preseason, but he didn't have actual preseason action outside of last year against the Raiders. And then was it 7 passes, 9 passes, whatever it might have been this year. And the NFL has just given up so much to the point. I think it's a shame that this is true, but has given up on preseason to the point where starters never play, and even the backups play only a little bit. And then it's on to third teamers, fourth teamers, and it doesn't even begin to simulate football. Back in my day, it used to. They used to play starters. They used to play backups into the third quarter, and then finally those third and fourth stringers would get in. It's probably a little better for opportunity and development for third and fourth stringers to play most of the game, but it's not better for developing quarterbacks, because the quarterbacks never get to see the real speed. Joint practices are great. It's still not the same as being actually out there. So it's almost like a preseason for JJ McCarthy, and it feels like his debut against the Detroit Lions. And as down as everyone deserves to be on this 3-4 team that we thought should probably be about 5-2 at this point, but obviously football had other plans with injuries and with disappointing performances and whatever's gone wrong schematically, and the combination of a bunch of different things to this point. So you can't wash that away, because they are down in the standings. Their odds of making the playoffs are very low at this point. I think I looked into this on FanDuel, and they were maybe plus 750 on FanDuel to make the playoffs, which is a long shot. It's about the same as the Carolina Panthers. Like, they're in need of a miracle second half of the season in order to make the playoffs. That is not where anybody had this team, and it doesn't excuse any of the things that have happened to say that it feels like a new season. It really does, though. With McCarthy coming back, it feels like a reset. It feels like a new season for the Minnesota Vikings as they head to Detroit with the quarterback that they had planned to have all along. And I've thought about this in a lot of different ways over the last 5 or 6 weeks. But one of the things I thought about was when you watch Cincinnati play and you see their defense and how awful their defense has been, you think, had he gotten hurt against Cincinnati and maybe played really well, how much different would we be talking about this entire thing? Had he gotten hurt against Chicago, how much different would we be talking, or would people feel in general about this? And as I've said, those 2 games to me are preseason. I don't look at them anymore, don't think about them anymore, because they mean nothing in the bigger picture of a 22-year-old quarterback who has not played much football. So O'Connell and McCarthy, they went over these 2 games, went through everything with a fine-tooth comb that they could take away positive and negative, look to improve, and off we go into the future with JJ McCarthy. I did ask him what he was able to learn from Carson Wentz, and I think he also in this clip commented on why he wasn't able to play on Thursday.
What did you see just from the way that Carson played, just on a positive aspect that you could take away?
I would say the biggest thing about Carson's game that I really admired was his ability to put balls in voids. You know, have that touch where he's throwing 60% balls and letting Justin go into that void and, you know, catch it there. So just being able to tempo my arm down on certain routes and certain end breakers and stuff like that is something I picked up from him big time.
JJ, you got worked out last Tuesday. Like, how close did you feel then to being able to go?
I felt close. You know, at the end of the day, it was still a couple things where I felt like my foot was in concrete, and you just don't want to be in that position, especially, you know, going into a Thursday game or Saturday or Sunday game. It really doesn't matter what game and when it is. Just not being able to move the way I want to and protect myself was the biggest concern.
So there you go. Much better for him. And I agreed with them not trying to push him out there on Thursday if he was not able to practice in full. He needed to be able to practice in full in order for him to start and have the best chance to succeed. So again, able to do that. Now back to full health. He can be the full version of JJ McCarthy, and we all can begin the process of watching and understanding what JJ McCarthy is and what he's going to be. But I also do want to say that if we're putting it all on this game against Detroit, that might be on the excessive side. I would say it's definitely on the excessive side if we are trying to look at this one game and make all of our determinations about JJ McCarthy. I think it's going to be over a 10-game sample where we have to look at the entirety of that. I won't focus too much on those first 2 games, but in terms of if he could play 10 games in a row to the end of the season, then we should have some sense of which bucket it falls into. Is it the bucket of franchise quarterback? I mean, it would have to be really, really good in order for that to be the case, but that's on the table. So could it be that? Could it be you feel good about him as your starter and you're not looking for outside quarterbacks to come compete with him going into next year because he's shown you enough? So think about Drake May last year was not great, and Michael Penix last year was not great, but they both showed their teams, hey, yes, this is what you should go forward with, and you don't have to bring in competition, and you're not going to have a competition with Kirk Cousins and Penix in the preseason and training camp. Like that's your guy for next year. It doesn't mean for sure he's locked in as the next Mahomes. It just means that's your dude. And then there's a next level down where there's some good and some bad, and you still feel like you don't know, and you are looking for another quarterback to come in and compete with him and see where it goes from there. That's kind of where San Francisco got with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy of like, all right, we're still not really sure, and we're going to bring in a competition and Sam Darnold and just see how it goes. Well, that could be the case, or it could go so poorly that you're talking about, all right, well, I don't know if you're completely throwing up the white flag, but you might have to. That's the range of outcomes over these 10 games, and which does that fall into? We could start figuring that out, but we can't get that entire answer against the Detroit Lions, which does tie into that, that FanDuel question of the day, which is just, what do you need to see from McCarthy to feel like it's a good game? And for me, I mean, what he mentioned about learning from Carson Wentz of being able to throw to areas and lead his receivers into those areas, I'd like to see just in and out of the huddle on time, which was not really a thing in the first 2 games, and it's going to be tough in Ford Field, but in and out of the huddle, command of the offense, throwing fairly accurately. I expect some misses. That's okay. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate, but fairly accurate. Move the offense, keep the offense on the field, make a couple of plays. And even if the final stat line, so I mentioned the over-under is 212.5, even if the final stat line is 200 yards, 16 for 25, a touchdown, no picks, like no turnovers, no catastrophic errors, things like that. I expect some mistakes to happen for McCarthy, but that's what you're looking for progress for him getting back in there, because it has been a while since he has played. But also, it's not like he's been doing nothing. Like, he's been working and he's been trying to improve. So that's my answer, is on time, in and out of the huddle, and move the offense. You don't have to be everything. You don't have to be perfect. Move the offense, and we'll start to feel like, okay, this is what it was supposed to look like. And then we're going to have to be patient from there. So I'll gather your answers here in a minute, but I did want to get to Carson Wentz talk to us today. And Carson called the coverage of the situation crazy, said to see some of the criticisms. And he said that, he's not an idiot, and he knew what was going on when he was dealing with that amount of pain during the game, and kept wanting to go out there and play, as you would expect from someone as tough as Carson Wentz, and someone who is a competitor and who is getting a chance to start and play when he hasn't gotten a chance to play very much over the last couple of years. So I would expect that. He also said that there was good communication between the medical team, Kevin O'Connell, and that he got second opinions on the labrum, and was told pretty much the same thing, that, hey, like, this is an injury you can play with if you can manage the pain, and then you can get surgery at a later date, which became earlier this week. So that's what Wentz had to say to us, that he felt like there was good communication and it was his decision to go back out there and play. I'll read you the main quote from Kevin O'Connell about this. He talked a lot, answered a lot of questions, but I'll just read it to you. The main thing that I took away with O'Connell. He said the consultation has to begin and start with the player and medical staff. And as the coach, you have to allow that to happen before you're a part of the conversations at all. So O'Connell's saying that before you can even ask the player if he's good to go, the player has to communicate with the medical staff. Okay. He said, then the conversations are purely what's in the best interest of the player. And at that point, Carson thought it was in his best interest of getting to play football and quarterback for the Vikings, and felt equipped and capable to do that. Okay, so that all makes sense, that the quarterback wanted to play. Kevin O'Connell was saying to the medical staff, this is all stuff we know, saying to the medical staff, hey, is he going to further injure himself? They're saying no, it's just a pain management thing. Okay. Now, later in this press conference, O'Connell did acknowledge that on TV, there's a million eyes everywhere with TV cameras, and it is maybe not the possible for a head coach to have eyes in the back of his head as someone is on the sideline. Now, I think that there were plenty of opportunities to see the type of pain that Wentz was in, but I think what he's referring to is, I didn't see that thing that you guys all saw and are reacting to. I think that's what he was trying to say. So back to his quote. He said, in regards to the second half, now this is where my specific criticism came in the other day. He said it's one of those things where you have, where after every drive, you can visually see that he took some hits and was in some pain, and making sure before we put him back on the field that dynamic hadn't changed. It was just the circumstances of him managing it. And then when the time came to take him out of the game, it was a football decision. Wanted to make sure we did right by him there late in the game when it was out of reach. But the way we operate where we believe we're out of reach might be different than how folks watching the game believe it to be. Now, this is where I don't necessarily agree, and I'm not going to spend much more time on this. We're going to get to your answers. But we did a little research in the old media room today. Dave Campbell, who's been on the show, the Associated Press, we found one NFL game in history, one ever, 1987, Neil Lomax and the Phoenix Cardinals coming back from down 24 in the fourth quarter to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. One example ever of a team down 24 that actually won the football game. I don't know if that was in the cards at 34-10 when they were still calling pass plays for Carson Wentz. That specifically was, hey, that's where I feel like you let it go too far. So he's saying that we still believed, and I understand that. Now, as far as I mentioned, Purple Insider being aggregated, I am not a big fan of when this happens. So the other night, I read a couple of messages, one from a person with knowledge of the situation, another from outside the building that is in the league, and someone that I trust their opinions. And those statements that I read to you turned into some AI headlines that were absolutely crazy, that were not what was actually said. So that was a little bit frustrating. If you see them, I guess you can roll your eyes along with me, but I did want to mention that. I usually don't like to say, here's what I'm being told, because it turns into that. And so I in the future, I'm just going to say what I think and probably not ever mention, here's what someone specifically texted me or whatever, because that just ends up turning into goop on the internet. I said before, I am very uncomfortable talking about the injury stuff. I hate it. I want to talk X's and O's. I want to talk data. I want to talk matchups and numbers and expectations and front office and team building. I don't like coming in and saying, hey, we got to second guess medical decisions and things like that. That's just not my area, and I am not comfortable with that and don't enjoy it. But I did feel like the messages that I got were credible and strong, and it painted a picture of how some people are viewing this situation this year. So I didn't say that O'Connell has lost the locker room. That's not what I said. I did see that in AI headlines, but that's not what I said. I said that someone who I really trust in the league messaged me and was very concerned about injuries and the connection with the head coach. That was the point. And if you listen to the whole segment, obviously you heard the point. But why would any machine who writes whatever those pass for articles listen to the whole segment? Anyway, so just wanted to make that clear. And, look, I also had pointed out in that same segment the NFLPA rankings and how the medical staff has been praised by Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Brian O'Neill repeatedly. So I want to make that clear. But you heard Jeremiah Searles talk about it. If you want to hear on the record discussion with a former player the other day, Jeremiah talked about the connection relationship with some players and Mike Zimmer in the past and how injuries can cause a lot of tension in the way that they're handled. That was the point of the message the person sent me. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we clear that up. I've wondered about some things this year, and certainly messages like that make me wonder about them, but I'm not in the medical room. You've heard me say it a million times. So that's not something I'm going to have anything more to say unless something else comes up. So we'll just leave it at that. The Carson Wentz issue is, I think, something that everybody empathized with Wentz and the amount of pain that he was in. O'Connell's explained his view. Wentz has explained his view. I've explained mine. And we're on to Detroit. So that's where that is all at. And okay, so I want to bring up, and then I'll get to your comments and your answers to the FanDuel question of the day. I want to bring up my article from yesterday over at purpleinsider.football. I have mentioned a handful of times, if you like the show, you want to support the show and read articles about the Vikings every day, purpleinsider.football, a good way to do it. So here's what I wrote for last night. I used a lot of data from True Media and created some cute little charts about how the Vikings can get the most out of JJ McCarthy and how they can help him the most strategically and so forth. So that's kind of the article. And I used a bunch of numbers. I'm just going to read you some from the article because I think it's interesting. The way that they've been attacked, the way that they've been covered so far by opponents, the way they've been blitzed, and what they might be able to do and some league trends here. So the blitz has been a major problem so far for the Vikings. In his first two games, JJ McCarthy had a very rough time against the blitz. facing at least 5 rushers on 17 dropbacks. He completed just 6 passes, threw 2 interceptions, and was sacked 3 times. So that right there alone, small sample size, but that's a lot of calamity and not much success when blitzed. So what you can absolutely expect is that he is going to get blitzed. And when Carson Wentz was blitzed, 48% completion percentage, 66 quarterback rating, and using True Media's passer efficiency rating, the Vikings have been the second worst team in the league. Now, they haven't been blitzed a ton overall because they've been losing by a lot, but the second worst performance in terms of True Media's passer efficiency rating against the blitz. That is something that absolutely has to change. But here's what I discovered is that KOC's offense has the answers. Last year, Sam Darnold averaged 9.5 yards per attempt against the blitz, 12 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and a 123.3 quarterback rating. I mean, that was excellent for Sam Darnold against the blitz. So the receivers are there. Darnold did have a consistent offensive line group. That has not been the case for the Vikings so far this year. So assuming that Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill will be ready to go against Detroit, they should be able to better handle the extra rusher. I am a little concerned about not having Josh Oliver for this game. For that, we'll see about CJ Ham. McCarthy, I assume it's going to be Blake Brandel, but also could be Michael Juergens. That is not the same as having Ryan Kelly. That could impact how things go against the blitz. And I'll show you in a minute that Detroit does like to dial it up sometimes. And they need to be better blocking in the backfield. Jordan Mason right now has a 37.4 PFF grade on 40 pass blocking snaps. That's just not enough. So CJ Ham, he has been really good in that area. Could use him back. Here's another thing, too. The Vikings have not performed very well against man coverage, and they've faced a lot of it so far this year. As you can see from this chart, or if you're listening, I'll just explain what it looks like. The Vikings have faced some of the most man coverage in the NFL, which is unusual for them. I mean, normally teams are wanting to play zones against them, but it might also be score effects there. And in terms of EPA per dropback overall, have not performed anywhere near some of the better teams in the NFL at the quarterback position. So they've been facing a lot of man. And the Detroit Lions, in terms of how much man coverage they play, it is a lot. It is actually only, according to True Media, under 60% of the time. So they're playing zone. So that means, 40% that they're playing, or more than 40% man. That is unusual in the NFL. One of the highest man rates in the league. You see Pittsburgh, Denver, New York Giants are the only teams around them. And in terms of blitzes, they are above average. So you can expect a lot of blitzes going up against JJ McCarthy. But when you hear man coverage, that means opportunity. And something to point out is that Jordan Addison, who had the best training camp, I think, of anybody on the Vikings, maybe on the entire team, was not playing in those first 2 games, which is, again, why we can kind of toss them out now that there's just been so much space in between what we saw then and now. But having Addison against the team that plays man coverage could be pretty good for JJ McCarthy performing better than he did in the first 2 games. Another thing I wanted to point out from the article at purpleinsider.football is the Vikings need to get yakking. Yards after catch, my friends. If you look at the yards after catch per completion around the NFL, top teams, Green Bay Packers, Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs, Indianapolis Colts are above average. The Broncos are above average. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are above average. And then, of course, even Pittsburgh as well, although many of those yards might have been against the Vikings with DK Metcalf. The Vikings right now are slightly above average for yards after catch per completion, but I think you could see a pretty clear trend here. Now, okay, the Rams are not one of the top teams. Matthew Stafford's their quarterback. The Eagles, they throw downfield. The Patriots, they throw downfield. So teams that are downfield passing, Seattle, are not getting as many yards after catch per completion. But a lot of the top passing games you can see are in the top right corner. And this little line here is showing, more teams that are completing passes and getting yards after catch are having better expected points added per dropback. So it is absolutely vital to get TJ Hawkinson going, get Justin Jefferson going, get Jordan Addison going in terms of yards after catch. I think it shows pretty clearly on this chart, especially where the Packers are. Yeah, Jordan Love is playing great. There's no doubt about it. Jared Goff's playing great. Patrick Mahomes, but they are also getting a lot of yards after catch and not having to push the ball down the field all the time. You would like to see that for an inexperienced quarterback. And that's another thing that I would like to see for sure from Kevin O'Connell from the Minnesota Vikings is that they continue to lean into some of those plays that really worked against Philadelphia and the Cleveland Browns when it came to the yards after catch. So there's a little bit of the type of stuff you get over at purpleinsider.football. Make sure you go check out the entire article and sign up if you like to. Let's get back to your questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings, and we'll go from there. So anything on the table, but the FanDuel question of the day specifically is JJ McCarthy's over-under is 212.5 yards against the Lions. What do you need to see to feel like McCarthy had a good game? Just give me one specific thing. You don't have to give a stat line. You can if you want, but one specific thing to feel like, you know what? That was a good game for JJ McCarthy. Give me that one thing that you would like to stick out for him. First question comes, this I didn't expect from I Shot You 99. What happened to Ty Chandler? Well, he got hurt in training camp preseason and went on IR. So must have been a serious injury. They could use him for returning purposes, but I think they feel good about Miles Price. Plus, they commit a penalty on every return anyway. So maybe it doesn't matter. I think if he was coming back, they might stick with Zay Scott. Not sure, but that was a little out of left field. But yeah, he hasn't been back. Let's see. RPA Fix. Anyway, sorry about the name there. Sounds like 10 years ago with the way that the season has gone, talking about those first 2 weeks. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's why when we're talking about this reset and just not using those first 2 games as a major evaluation tool to look at JJ McCarthy overall, that's exactly how I feel. It really seems like it was so long ago that he played in those 2 games, and it was some good and it was some bad. And what's the determination we can make on JJ McCarthy after those 2 games? None. I mean, I really think the answer is none to take away, because, you know, you can look at other quarterbacks in the past and how they've played. Well, this guy in his first couple games did this, or this guy in his first couple games did this. And that's okay. That's fair to look at. But this is an entirely different situation. I mean, this is somebody who missed an entire season, who is 22 years old, who didn't have much of a preseason in terms of getting out there and actually playing. So not only that, but was missing his left tackle, missing his second wide receiver, and playing on a Monday night and then a Sunday night. Like, it was just, there was a lot there that we can see some things. We could see arm talent, we could see athleticism, and we could see how he managed the game in Chicago, which I think is, after talking to Aaron Jones today, like, that's what a lot of players are going to be leaning on as they, get behind JJ McCarthy, is like, hey, we saw this kid lead the game-winning drives, lead a fourth quarter comeback. Like, hey, I mean, this is, that's one bad game against Atlanta, which I pointed out. I mean, how many young quarterbacks have had a bad game? And that's why I just think you have to wait. You have to wait and see and treat those a little bit more like preseason, where you could take away a little, but certainly not a lot. But it does feel like a really, really long time ago. Benjamin says Tebow had good energy and excitement too. Wow. Yeah, you know what? That is true. Tim Tebow did, and so have plenty of successful quarterbacks. You're right. That's exactly what I was doing, Benjamin. I was saying, because he seemed excited, that he is going to be Joe Montana. That's what I was saying. I think that because this has been so frustrating to wait and wait and wait and wait for McCarthy to play, there are a lot of people probably in Vikings land who have sort of thrown up their hands like, okay, well, this just isn't going to work out. And that's why I continue to say that it really is just, we're going to have to see. He's going to have to be on the field. He's going to have to play, and we've got to see more because, right now, having no sample size has turned into, for some, having a bad sample size. I don't really think it is. I don't think those first two games were good. I think Atlanta was really poorly played by JJ McCarthy. And the number of times that Kevin O'Connell has brought up the practice thing, I think it's pretty clear that he felt that way as well. That maybe he thought that there was a lot left out there on the field. I would agree with that after watching the game back. But I also thought that there was a lot of stuff that he didn't get credit for in the game against Chicago. And what we've got after two games is, JJ McCarthy playing well sometimes and not well other times on his 55 dropbacks, which is only about 880 less than Bo Nix right now. So we don't have anything close to the answer. But, I understand there were a lot of skeptical folks about JJ McCarthy from the outset. And we watch training camp and we get to the end of training camp and feel like, okay, think that he can do this and let's go find out. And so you go to Chicago and they're down in the game and, I'm getting text messages from people. This is why they should have kept Sam Darnold and stuff. It's like, whoa, this is the first half of the first game. And then he wins and it's, he's the franchise quarterback. Go back and watch that podcast or listen to that podcast after that game. And how much the energy was, the excitement, the locker room scene was crazy in Chicago, and the players were all telling stories about McCarthy on the sideline. It's amazing how fast things can change, but I don't think there's a negative correlation between excitement and success in the NFL. Score One More says, not trying to be sarcastic, didn't they say when Blake got back, the run defense would be better? The Chargers racked up over 200 yards. Yeah, Blake Cashman, right. Well, that game was also a major part of the score. And when they racked up a lot of those yards was when the game was mostly out of hand. But in terms of how the overall defense has looked, and I just recorded a podcast with Cody Alexander, one of my favorite people in just the NFL analysis space, a tremendous analyst. And this is going to run tomorrow on the podcast feed. Is the way that this thing was constructed is questionable. And the way it's been coached might be questionable as well. But really the roster construction, and he mentioned moving on from Harrison Phillips and not having a true nose tackle, that's played a role in it as far as Blake Cashman and his success. If you don't have guys that can stick on their offensive linemen and stuff gaps, then it is harder for someone like Blake Cashman to fly around because the offensive lineman can get out to him and can block him. But I really did feel like that was just the case because when the game was closer, they were not dominating on the ground the same way that, say, Pittsburgh did for most of that game in the Kenneth Gainwell game. It was mostly Herbert. And then once they're up by 21 points, then, okay, now they're going to hand off to Vidal. The defense is on the field the whole time. Just to give you a preview of that conversation with Cody Alexander, he called it a front-running defense. I mean, he said, if you can play from ahead, this defensive front can kill people. But if you're playing from down 21 and you've been on the field the entire night, it's going to be pretty hard to just shut down the run game. They did a good job the week before against Saquon Barkley, so I don't think it's impossible for them. But there has been a lot of different trickle-down effects. I think getting back Andrew Van Ginkel will be really big for them in terms of stopping the run. But there are realities to the way that this thing was built. It was built to be able to shut down 3rd and 10, not necessarily 1st and 10 down by 20 points. And that I think is where a lot of those run yards came from. RPAN VIX. Sorry, I keep screwing that up. Rhythm and timing, is what you want to see from JJ McCarthy. I agree though. I agree. That is what you want to see. Is you want to see it look like it can be timely in a lot of different fashions, right? And the guy who's on the other side, Jared Goff, nobody does it better than playing with rhythm and timing. And that rhythm starts in the huddle. It's get the play into your headset, get it to your teammates, get them lined up with 20 seconds to go on the play clock, 15 seconds to go, where you can make any adjustment, check to something else if you need to, and not be having it go 5, 4, 3, 2, and you're going, he snapped the ball. We saw that too many times from McCarthy in the first 2 games, where it did not look like he had full command of the offense. And that is the difference between playing in real games and doing it in a joint practice, is that if you mess that up, it's like, oh, okay, well, just do it again. There's no just do it again when the actual lights are at their brightest. So rhythm and timing usually refers to throwing in rhythm, timing with wide receivers, timing with your footsteps, get to the hitch, let it go, that kind of thing. But I think of it as timing of getting the offense started and then getting everything set up and where you need to go with the football is often determined before the snap, but it's really hard to read the defense when you're scrambling out of the huddle. So, and I will say that, he's not the only quarterback for the Vikings that's had that problem. So O'Connell was asked today about, looking back at those 2 games and some of the things that have worked for them and making adjustments. I think there's some clear adaptations there of trying to simplify things to just get him out of the huddle. But I also know that O'Connell feels like you got to know the entire offense for it to work. So Aaron says, finish the game healthy and I'll call it a success. Well, it's progress. It would be progress to stay healthy. And that has to be number one thing for sure, is get out of Detroit healthy, be able to come back, play a Ravens defense that's been mostly down all season, is starting to improve, but to get on a roll of games so he can get comfortable with playing week in and week out, I think is really important for JJ McCarthy. So even though maybe you're being a little sarcastic, I also agree with you that getting out of the game healthy is a success. Paints hard says, I'll take a passing touchdown, only 1 interception. Catastrophic plays can't have them. That was the thing with the Atlanta game, is you can look at it any way you want. You could say, well, the tackle wasn't playing well, Addison wasn't playing well, they didn't run the ball very well, the defense didn't do this or that. But if you're going to play quarterback in the NFL, you cannot drop snaps, you can't get strip sacked, you can't throw interceptions where you're late on someone breaking out of a route and they read exactly where you're going with the football. Turnovers and turnover-worthy plays is something that we'll be watching really, really closely here, because those are things you can't overcome. If you overthrow a guy, it was a McCarthy issue at times in camp and mini camp, of just straight up, that ball flying way over somebody's head. That's not that bad. If you have that problem, okay, if it's in the middle of the field, maybe a safety catches it. But if you're throwing an out route or something, you're throwing a deep ball and whoops, you threw it over their head, next play, you're fine. If you are throwing interceptions because you're not timing your routes correctly, if you're getting strip sacked because you're not getting rid of the football or identifying rushes up front or seeing what's going on in front of you up front and protecting the ball, there's nothing that anybody can do to help you schematically when that is the issue. I shot you 99. My answer to the FanDuel question of the day: need McCarthy to be decisive and get the ball out of his hands quickly. That's number 1. Number 1 on my list is, yes, decisiveness would be that. Show control of this offense. Show that you know it. Show that you know where the football is supposed to be. And that's what I mean, getting the calls in and out, getting to the line of scrimmage, getting the ball out of your hands. You have to know at this point, if you're O'Connell, that getting some of those package type plays, those easy button type plays, those are going to have to be a part of this, but they can't be all of it. You can't draw up every screen. You can't draw, at some point, you need the quarterback probably out of, 30 dropbacks, at least 15 to 20 times. You need him to stand at the line of scrimmage, read where he's supposed to go with the football, take the snap, step back 2 steps and throw it. And you saw the stat that I showed you with the yards after catch for Green Bay. They're getting the ball out of Jordan Love's hands so fast these days. There are so many passes. I'm going to look this up real quick. How many passes Jordan Love has thrown in under 2.5 seconds? And I'm sorry that I know some of you get visibly upset when I bring up Jordan Love and success, but I feel like it's been coached really, really well in Green Bay, really well. So in terms of, here you go. Let's see. Joe Flacco, Patrick Mahomes. Where is Jordan? Okay. So Jordan Love, here you go. In less than 2.5 seconds, Jordan Love is averaging 7.9 yards per attempt, which is number 2 in the NFL. The only guy that's higher is Josh Allen. I mean, that tells a story right there. Daniel Jones also 7.8 yards per pass attempt when he gets rid of the football in 2.5 seconds. Jordan Love is 4th in the league in PFF grade when he gets rid of it in less than 2.5 seconds. I mean, there's just a story being told here. Love has the highest completion percentage. And here's Jared Goff is averaging 7.3 yards per attempt when he gets rid of it in 2.5 seconds. Like it's a thing. It is a very real thing. If you can get rid of the football quickly and you've got a good scheme, good players, the Vikings have those things that you could succeed. Benjamin wants a 70% completion percentage. If it's 65, I'll take it. If it's less than 60, you're still asking, hey, come on, like what's going on there? Because, if you can hover around 60 to 65 completion percentage, which is not a great stat, by the way, but if that's kind of where you're at, like, you can move an offense. If you're below 60, you're missing a lot of passes, and it's going to be very hard to maintain drives. Zoomer KO, FanDuel question of the day. I need to see effort and competitiveness from the Vikings as a whole. Yeah, well, this game, they are overmatched overall when you look at the two teams. And, this is clear on paper, every stat. The Detroit Lions have been the much, much better team than the Vikings. In fact, the Lions might be the best team in the entire NFL on paper. Maybe, that loss to Kansas City, a little bit of a question there, but the way they beat down Tampa Bay, they've put up big numbers. They've had blowout wins. This is a very, very good football team. And Aleem McNeil coming back is a nightmare for the Vikings because his interior rush is phenomenal. And that interior rush has been a big problem over the last few weeks with Blake Brandel. And we'll see if he's starting again. But the interior rush has been an issue that they've had to face with a backup center in the game. So they're going to face a lot of pressure. It's going to be really hard to stop Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. Like, this is a team that is completely stacked. And if they can hang in a game with JJ McCarthy coming back for the first time, let's even say that it's 28-24, you lose the game. I mean, that's not where this was supposed to be. It's not what the season was supposed to be. But in the circumstances right now, with the defense having the struggles that they've had this year so far, if that's the game you lose and McCarthy keeps you in it to the very end and puts 24 points on the board, then you feel pretty good about that. So I tend to agree that you're right. That competitiveness and being in this game at the end, if that's where you're at, then I think you're in pretty good shape. Score One More says that the dude hasn't played. We really need to lower our expectations. Yeah, I mean, it depends on where your expectations are. Like, everybody is going to have different expectations. FanDuel's are 212.5 yards. I think that that's about fair for what you should expect for how heavily they're going to lean on him to throw the football. If they do get down in the game, you're probably putting up more yardage just by proxy of having to throw and throw. But I think that's a fair number in a close type of game. If your expectation is that he can run the operation, make some throws, make some plays, flash some next level athletic ability, flash some next level arm talent, and be in the game in the fourth quarter, I don't think that's a high bar for a young quarterback. I think that that's a fair place to set the expectations. I don't think you're putting that through the roof. I'm not saying if JJ McCarthy doesn't go out and throw for 300 and win this game against the Lions that he's a bust and they need to move on. I'm not saying that. That maybe that'll be the aggregated version, but that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's a lot of these cues that we can get from him of, can you show that you look like the starting quarterback of an NFL team that can move the football and get the football to the wide receivers you have and throw to the voids, as he said, make some plays with the feet. I mean, that is, I think, fair, because that's stuff that can project forward. If you go out there and you throw the ball, while you're getting hit and it bounces off someone and you run it for a 50-yard touchdown, well, that's not really stuff that's good for the box score, but that's not really stuff that is going to travel from week to week. You're looking for things that are going to travel and get a baseline of where you can improve on throughout the next 10 weeks. And then you start to build that sample size. Bry L70s, being able to get rid of the ball faster and showing more accuracy on the short passes. Totally agree. Accuracy on the short passes, timing on the short passes, that is something that he has to improve hugely. I mean, it was really a problem that they did not succeed at all in short passing. And that's where, we've seen people bring up like, oh, why didn't they just call short pass plays? And the ones that they did and the ones that he threw, they weren't very good. And actually his best throws were the intermediate stuff, which is part of that article that I wrote and read some of earlier. Is like he has been really good at being able to get the ball into those intermediate areas. He's been good on 1st and 10. 1st and 10, he's 9 for 12 passing in those first 2 games. And you can use some play action at that point, and it's a run pass type of situation. So yeah, like you can do those things with 1st down and 10, but you have to be able to complete the stuff that's under 10 yards to move an offense consistently, especially with defenses saying, we're going to dare you to rack up a 15-play drive. Like that's how defense is played these days, is a lot of teams are playing their safeties back. Now, Detroit might not do that as much because they are a more aggressive team. They do play cover 1 more than other teams, but still, like most teams are saying to you, hey, we kind of dare you to complete 8 passes to get a touchdown. And JJ McCarthy has to be able to do that in a timely fashion to get 7 completions, 6 completions on a drive to be able to move the ball. So I totally agree with that. Ben says, call plays that have short options, limit the number of dropbacks that require the route to develop. Yeah. This is the hard balance, is that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are really, really good at running those routes that you're talking about. I mean, think about some of the best plays since Carson Wentz was starting. I mean, it's a lot of downfield stuff. It's not all just, check downs or quick little, have Justin Jefferson just stand there and catch the ball and run with it. That was a good play. But a lot of it has been, hey, here's Justin Jefferson against Cleveland down the middle of the field. And that does take a little bit of time to get there. And it does take a good throw to get the ball there. But you also have to have a mix of being able to get the ball out of his hands, get him into a rhythm. So I don't want to say exclusively, hey, just short pass. Like sometimes this becomes like a meme where it's like, are we just looking at things and yelling short pass? Like throw short. Like, whoa. Like this guy was brought here also to use the cannon to throw down the field 15 to 20 yards where all of his best throws were at Michigan. So I don't want to say KOC, get rid of all that stuff. But I think you have to have passes that get a guy going, and not only just get a guy going from the quarterback position, but also get Addison going, get Justin Jefferson going, get some comfort there, just like the get a bucket type of idea. So it has to be somewhat of a mix. Ben also wants the game script to be run heavy early on and creativity to get Jets the ball. Yeah, the creativity to get Justin Jefferson the ball, I think over the last, not Thursday, nothing happened on Thursday. The few games before that, I thought was really good. And I had asked Jefferson about that last week before the game. And he likes, of course he likes those plays, the ball's in his hand, but he likes an opportunity to get yards after catch, to line up in the backfield and get a swing pass, or to have a little bit of a tricky alignment and get him a slant real quick just to get the football in his hands and get him going. So that's what I'm talking about. It can't be all of one of those things. It can't be just, hey, just use a bunch of gimmicky stuff and short passes, when then you're limiting what your wide receivers do best, and then you're limiting what JJ McCarthy does best. Want to see the connection between him and Addison? I definitely do too. Because that's one that in training camp, when we're talking about these anticipation throws and stuff like that we didn't see a lot of in the first couple games, well, the guy that he was throwing those anticipation balls to was Jordan Addison almost every time. And so we do want to see that connection And it's unfortunate that over the last 5 weeks, he hasn't been in there. And then at the beginning of the year, Addison wasn't in there. So now they get their first opportunity. It's not coming right off of training camp and carrying over that momentum into the season. But nonetheless, at least he had a really good sense for, okay, like this is how Jordan Addison runs his routes. This is when I could put the ball up to him. This is where I could throw it and he could go get it. And he just didn't get an opportunity to be able to carry that over into the season. Marcus, I just want to see JJ throw a touchdown. I don't expect to. You don't expect to. I think you get one, but need to see it out of him for some hope. That is kind of, I think, emblematic right there, that comment of where a lot of people are at just with this team overall, because it has been a really rough ride so far for the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, it just has. And this has been, I think, let's see, it's not the biggest gap between expectations and reality, because that would be 2010. Doesn't get much different, much worse than that. Like 2010, expecting to go back and have a chance at the Super Bowl, and then Brett Favre just not being Brett Favre anymore. So I think that was probably the biggest disappointment that Vikings fans have faced in the last 20 years. And then it would be 2018, where you come off of an NFC Championship appearance, you sign Kirk Cousins. That was not quite the same as Favre, because Favre is one of the greatest players of all time, and you just expected him to do it again. Whereas Kirk Cousins, maybe there was some like, hey, this guy was coming off a 7-9 season and has sort of been a 500 quarterback, and some skepticism there about whether he could actually take that to the next level, but still nonetheless a pretty big disappointment. This one falls right in that same category so far. And if you're just looking for, hey, just give me one JJ McCarthy touchdown to cling on to, I don't blame you for that, because this team has not given you a lot to cling on to over these last couple of weeks. They really haven't. Really, actually, at any point this season outside of JJ McCarthy leading a touchdown drive to win in Chicago. And man, it's crazy how things can change, because in that press box in Chicago, as Dane Mizutani are doing our podcast, and a cleaning lady is, no disrespect, but she's doing her job behind us and flushing a toilet in the background. And we're like, come on, we're trying to break down like one of the coolest things we've seen covering this team, and you're flushing a toilet in the background. I will not forget that. But the energy of the locker room and doing that podcast after and thinking about, like, what has this got for us? Like, what does this season have in store for us? This could be a crazy ride. And then it just has not gone that way. It's been very disappointing, I think, and especially for Vikings fans who, after that game, were all in on JJ McCarthy, ready to go for whatever was going to come in this season. And if they were 3-4 and McCarthy had played like the combination of McCarthy and Wentz, it would still be disappointing. And people would still be talking about, hey, maybe you should have had Sam Darnold, but at least we would get data on JJ McCarthy. At least we would be able to say, here's what's worked. Here's what hasn't worked. Here's what he's got to do in the future. And to not have even that, to not even have a touchdown like you're talking about, that I think has been the hardest part. Justin's still positive on the Vikings, even after being at the game in LA. Well, you are tough, Justin, for that. They're getting healthy, and we haven't seen this team healthy once this year. Let's give it through November before we burn it all down. Yeah, I think that's reasonable. But I don't know if all the problems are fixable. Now, we have seen defenses turn it around in the middle of seasons. Defense can be so fickle and so confusing sometimes. The Baltimore Ravens last year had one of the worst defenses in the NFL, and then all of a sudden it was like, wait, they're good now? That happens sometimes. And I wouldn't be shocked if the offense started playing better if all of a sudden the defense starts playing better. Getting Van Ginkel back, having Harrison Smith having played some games now and getting into a rhythm, having Cashman back like that. This is much closer to the full unit that they expected, and Dallas Turner can get into more of a role that they expected to have Dallas Turner in and that kind of thing. And I think with Jonathan Grenard, he's had so many pressures that will turn into sacks at some point that haven't, because Justin Herbert's 6'6", or because Jalen Hurts is one of the strongest quarterbacks in the league. Like, a lot of these things that haven't clicked, it's possible that they do. When you are in this big of a hole, it's really tough to find anything to circle and be like, oh, this points to their future success, especially when you're about to play two of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And then not too long from now, you're traveling to Green Bay in late November, which is not an easy task. So I think there's probably two different ways to look at it. If you're talking about from a standings perspective, from a, hey, they could get hot and get back into this thing, that to me is a pretty far-fetched idea, considering how good Detroit and Green Bay are. Now, if they beat Detroit, then maybe we could talk. But if they don't beat Detroit, and they're 3-5 playing the Ravens at home, and that is far-fetched. But in terms of like ending this season in a way you feel good about it, that remains on the table because of number 9. Mr. Mayor, FanDuel question of the day, just want JJ McCarthy to not look panicked out of his mind every play when they zoom in on him. It'd be nice if he doesn't can out of every single play within 3 seconds of the clock. Yeah, that's the biggest thing for sure of JJ McCarthy is just, it's got to start there. It has to start with get to the line of scrimmage and get the playoff and not trying to switch plays every time. I totally agree with that. Now, sometimes you have to, and it's the smart thing to do, and you check into a run when you've got the right look, and that's how you play football. But if you're not out of the huddle, just run the play and do the best you can with it, because standing there and smacking yourself in the head over and over again until the play clock runs out, you're not going to get much out of that. But the operation, I think, is what you're talking about. DLM, where it does matter is if KOC didn't learn his lesson with play calling in those first 2 games. He needs reps, but not if it's KOC setting him up for failure from the get-go behind our patchwork line. Well, it's not supposed to be a patchwork line this time. It's not supposed to be against Detroit. Now, they're going to be able to create pressure, but Christian Darrisaw practiced in full. That's progress. Brian O'Neill was limited, so that would be a concern. Also, Jonathan Grenard was limited. Whether they will have Brian O'Neill back or not is up in the air, but getting Christian Darrisaw, it seems, practicing in full should help. But also, you're just never going to have, it's hard to have a full, complete offensive line looking and feeling great. Now, what happened with Wentz the other night with 3 backups, now that is extreme. But in this case, if you're playing with 1 backup, 2 backups, well, that's kind of how it goes in football. You got to figure out ways to work around it. But the Kevin O'Connell part of this, I always get very uncomfortable trying to say, well, look, it didn't work. And that, how about that stat that I brought up earlier against the blitz? Well, he must be calling all the wrong plays. But last year, Sam Darnold averaged 9.5 yards per attempt, 12 touchdowns, 0 picks against the blitz. So I guess he was calling the good plays then and the bad plays now. Like, that's always a tricky thing for me, because we have these past years where good quarterbacks have played well with this play calling and with this system. Now, that doesn't mean it's right on 3rd down and 1 to try to roll out broken Carson Wentz and have that play blown up immediately. Like, run the ball. I think there's specific ideas that we could talk about, but against Cleveland, against Philadelphia, I thought, okay, red zone, maybe you've got questions on that for, again, why you didn't run on 2nd down and 10, or some of that was bad luck where you have a bad holding call that kind of ruins a drive, and maybe a wide open TJ Hawkinson that Carson Wentz can't get the football to, and then is it a catch and that kind of thing. But when you look at how they move the football and the success rate in the game against Philadelphia, I can't come out of that and say, wow, they messed everything up with play calling. They were moving the ball all day. And against Cleveland, they had, I think, enough success passing it against Myles Garrett and a great D-line to say, well, I think that was pretty good. Those were a little bit of adjusted game plans from what we may have seen earlier. But I also think that the way that O'Connell has talked about that Atlanta game sort of tells you how much was just execution on some of those plays. And I felt the same way as I was watching it back. Now, that's not all that way. A lot of it was personnel, and some of and I had a criticism about, the team is got a chance to get back in that game at 14-6, and you start off with an empty protection that ends up being blown up with a strip sack. And that's a little bit like, your quarterback is really struggling. Is this what you want to do right now? So there's some of that. There's some of that common sense within the game and not getting lost within the game and just calling plays that through the years I have maybe observed or critiqued. But I think when people call KOC a bad play caller, I just can't get there with you. Not after watching last year, not after watching Kirk Cousins, especially early in 2023. Can't just say, oh, this guy has no idea what he's doing. Not when they were smoking the blitzes. Not when last year Sam Darnold had 129 quarterback rating when he's running play action. Like, those are plays that are drawn up by the play caller. You got to be able to do it. You got to be able to do it. Now, can you cut it down? Can you simplify it? Can you make it easier? Can you get more yards after catch? Absolutely. And those are things that I want to see. So I'm like halfway in there with you. Kerpluppy says, do you think KOC's behavior with Brosmer has anything to do with his handling of Jaren Hall? I recall his takeaway from that experience is I shouldn't have rushed a young QB in like that. That's possible. Yeah, that's possible. And, look, Jaren Hall, that was a tough one. I think that Jaren is a really good dude. Sorry, I got to open a Diet Dr. Pepper here. Turn the heat on in the house, and it's hot. Turned it up too high. Okay. Sorry about that. But, they were struggling and they were frustrated by Nick Mullins and all the interceptions. And O'Connell just said, you know what? Screw it. It's Jaren Hall time. And Jaren Hall was good in practice. He was good in preseason and training camp, and we liked a lot of stuff we saw. And then he got out there and was not ready to play, and the Green Bay Packers ate him alive. And that's possible that was influential in not putting Brosmer out there too early. Now, I think that when the game gets to a certain point, when history says one game ever has been won, when ESPN's Gamecast has it at 0.1%, yeah, it's time to put in Max Brosmer and just have him hand off, just have him run some screens or check downs or something. But I think in terms of the people who said, hey, you've got a better chance to win with Brosmer, that might be true, or it might have been catastrophic. You have to give Max Brosmer time as well. And I like Brosmer a lot. I saw the half-joking report from Kevin Seifert that he said, hey, maybe he didn't want to put in Brosmer to not create a quarterback controversy with him. And, some of you have picked up on that. I think that's obviously pretty silly. I just think that the progress that Max Brosmer has made, you want next year for him to go into training camp and compete in training camp and win a number 2 job and show you that he's going to be a quarterback for a long time. Putting him in too early, potentially taking some hits, trying to have him start that game over Wentz. I mean, with the hits that Wentz took, you don't want that for a young quarterback who might not have all the answers. I mean, even a veteran quarterback didn't have the answers and took a ton of hits. Khalil Mack's out there. I mean, they've got pressure everywhere. I don't think that it would have been very successful to have Brosmer in there. It's better to look forward to the future with him. So you can think that the future is bright without being kind of silly about it. Like, just, hey, I want to see anything else and anyone else play other than Carson Wentz. But maybe it's possible that experience did influence the way that Kevin O'Connell handled that he felt like, maybe he did rush a little bit too much with Jaren Hall. And I just think in general that young quarterbacks, you heard Searles say this the other day, when he watches young quarterbacks around the league, what's the number one issue? It's seeing it out there, seeing how quick the game is, processing it quickly, getting rid of the football. And I've liked the processing speed of the mind of Max Brosmer in training camp. Impressive. The way it ended in preseason, impressive. The anticipation throws, all impressive. Quite different against the Los Angeles Chargers, who are killing your 2 offensive tackles and sending blitzes up the middle on your backup center. Just different story, different human beings, not third stringers, not second string. Second stringers are not good, as we know, around the league. You compare that to third stringers, fourth stringers. Like, let's let him develop. Let's let him develop. And he might get in some games. Like, we don't know. It's possible. They signed John Wolford, who's played before in the league. And at some point, he's a pro. And if he's got to play, then he's got to go play. that night, though, would not have necessarily wanted to see that. Justin, did they have Brandel at center? That I don't know. When it comes to practice, what we see in practice is the warm-ups. So in the season, during training camp, we see everything. We watch the whole practice, but in the season, we just see the warm-ups. So we don't know if Brandel is going to be the starting center. I would think that he will be, because you're looking for someone with more experience in a place like Ford Field, being able to identify blitzes, being able to help JJ McCarthy with the protections. I think you probably want Brandel there, even though, you are talking about somebody who is a mismatch in not the good way against some of these really good defensive tackles. I mean, Tyleik Williams, a big guy, powerful young player. Aleem McNeil is an absolute monster. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the league. So it's not going to be an easy matchup there. That's for sure. But no matter who plays, I don't think it's a good matchup. Marcus would like to see JJ roll out and protect himself. Getting him on the move, I think, is a really good idea. Getting him rolling, he could throw on the move. That's something that we didn't see too much of in the first two games, but would like to see that. There was one play where he kind of just rolled out and had to check it to CJ Ham, and it looked ugly, but it was actually like a good play by him, I think. So yeah, I agree with you. That's pretty good there. Ben says I would commit to him for this year and next. If he sucks next year, our record would reflect that, and it could be a decent quarterback draft in 2027. That's something that I'm not far enough down the road on anything. And I know that, people like to get there quickly. I haven't thought about the 2027 quarterback draft. Maybe it's going to be good. I don't know. I haven't thought about McCarthy not being on the team, but in terms of the 10-game evaluation and then going into next year, it would really only be a circumstance where it looked like Anthony Richardson or Trey Lance, where you said, this can't be the person throwing to Justin Jefferson next year. If it looks like that, if it's that much of a struggle, then you can't continue down that path. Now, to me, that outcome, if we're doing a pie chart, in fact, why don't we? Why don't we do a pie chart? Okay, the outcomes that I gave earlier in the show were absolute freak show, totally dominant, gets him into the playoffs, wins 7 of the last 10, instant superstar. Then it was pretty good, maybe wins half the games, shows some talent, has some ups and downs. Then the third one was, we're still really not sure, wins 3, maybe 4, has a couple of good games, more not so great games. And then the last one is, what the heck was that? I think that the megastar, the instant megastar, is probably a 10% outcome with his experience and what we've seen a little bit already, just going out there and totally dominating other teams, taking over, becoming the next Josh Allen. Not super likely, probably even less than that. I might even just go like 5%, just because how many quarterbacks are that in general? So totally dominant, freak show, monster animal. Let's just go 5% chance. The next one is more like 35%, where he's pretty darn good and performs really well. They win half the games. It looks good mostly, has some rocky moments. I think that's still very much on the table. So that's 40%. That'll go 35% there. Let's go another 40% that it's 3 or 4 wins and we're just really not sure. So that gets us to 80. And then I suppose it's probably 20% chance that it's just not good at all. And it goes in a way that you're looking for other quarterbacks to come in and compete. Maybe 20% is a little high, knowing how hard the kid's going to work and so forth. But I think what also falls into that 20% would be an injury and another injury that causes problems. So throw that into, like, we still don't know because the sample size isn't good enough because there's another injury. Let's put that at about 20%. So that's the range of outcomes there. And I think the middle two are by far the most likely. You're either going to feel pretty darn good or pretty unsure, but I don't think it's going to be a wild extreme of, hey, this is by far all set, or hey, this is by far don't bring any competition in whatsoever. Overall, though, I generally agree with your idea, though. Like, don't make a decision on this. Like, you're not cutting him. You're not trading him. You're not basing everything on this. You have to have the assumption as you're going forward, JJ McCarthy is going to be your quarterback this year and next, and then we'll see from there. But if it goes a certain way, then you at least need to have competition. You're not looking for maybe a new starter, but you at least need to have competition. Jerry says tight end needs to stay home and block more often. That's the problem with not having Josh Oliver in the game. That makes it tougher. I also think that you need TJ Hockenson to throw the ball to. When you look around the league, there's a lot of tight ends who are succeeding. It's successful plays. I had this in my article, but I believe throwing to Sam Laporta in terms of a successful play, which you can look up the definition, but it kind of tells the story in itself. It's like 70% of the time they throw him the ball, it's a successful play. I mean, it's a good play. In Hockenson last 2 years, I think is 54%. So it's a good play to get the tight end the football. So you can't just go max protect all the time and send out, 2 or 3 receivers. That's just not really a viable strategy, especially when TJ Hockenson is your tight end. Like, he's supposed to be a playmaker. Let's see. DLM says we all laughed at Ben Johnson when he talked about getting out of the huddle and lining up until we saw the Vikings regular season. Fair enough. You really do have to be able to do that. And we still see the Bears having problems with it, though. I just read Courtney Cronin the other day where she was writing about pre-snap penalties and stuff are still an issue. So if it continues to be for the Vikings, that is a red flag. That I agree with. Let's see. Score One More says Ty and Elijah would make a big difference. Probably not. I'd like to see, I assume you mean Elijah Williams. I'd like to see a little more of him. And as we go along, a lot more if it's going badly for the defensive tackles. Ty Felton, I think Jalen Naylor's been really good so far this year and just hasn't gotten the football. I mean, this is like hey, I watch the tape every week, but I think Jalen Naylor's been really good. If I'm another team, I would look at that and go, hey, let's get this guy in. Let's give him the football. I mean, they used him on 1 reverse. How about 3 reverses? He's gone down the field some, but I think that he has played well so far this year. It just hasn't really shown up in the statistics because the quarterbacks are not getting him the football. But Ty Felton is another example of this guy's drafted at the back end of the 3rd round. He's just going to need some time. I don't think you should ask those players to be difference makers on your team right now. Just develop him for next year. Corey says JJ can process all he wants. Ford Field will be very forgiving. Well, I mean, if he's processing well, then, Ford Field is difficult, just like many places are difficult. Soldier Field is difficult and was for him. But that doesn't mean that you just walk in there and melt into 1,000 pieces. If you're processing well, if you're getting the operational stuff together and you're getting to the line of scrimmage and you're able to determine pre-snap basically what you're going to do, then you've got a really good chance to succeed right there. And if you're processing, it just means that you're seeing a step ahead of, based on what the defense is doing, based on the play that you have, where does the football need to go? And then being right a lot. And Jared Goff never gets enough credit in the NFL because he's not a highlight reel. He's a processing monster. And play after play after play after play, this guy just gets it right. His guesses are right. The other quarterbacks who are considered the best of the best, their guesses might not always be right, but they're just freaks athletically. And so they're more fun to watch. But Goff, he's exactly what you want JJ McCarthy to look like, is with a little more speed, with a little more running ability, but that same sort of, processing, just meaning here's my options, here's where they're going to be versus what defense I'm seeing, and then throwing with anticipation to those spaces on time. That's all it really is. Keith says, and all of you good folks are answering the FanDuel question of the day here. And that FanDuel question of the day was the over-under for JJ McCarthy for this game, 212.5. What do you need to see to feel like McCarthy had a good game? That is the FanDuel question of the day that folks are responding to here with a lot of great answers. Keith says, one thing I want to see from McCarthy is to win in Detroit. He can do it, especially with the routes so far. Asking him to win this game, I think, is a lot, because that has a lot more to do with I mean, just think about like the defense and the special teams and like the entire game, whether you can actually win or not. Now, him winning in Detroit would be great for him. I mean, it would be a real springboard for him for the rest of the season, even if that win is ugly, even if it's hideous, even if it needs a pick six from the Vikings, like finding a way to beat this team of this caliber of Detroit would be enormous, especially when they've played really well defensively. It's just, I don't need that to think he played well. Doing it is sort of obvious. I mean, if they win, yeah. I mean, then, well, that's great for him. I don't need that from him to say he did well. That would be my point. SF Will, KOC needs to go heavy and bring in extra offensive linemen to run the ball. You know, it's a thing that makes sense, and I like the 6 offensive linemen, but it's not something they've ever done, and they really don't have a guy to do it. Like, remember when they had Aviant Collins, where they would kind of do that with him from time to time? Dan Skipper is the great example of this. I don't know who that guy is on the Vikings. I've never seen them go 6 offensive linemen because they have Josh Oliver. That's the unfortunate part about not having Oliver for this game, is that you can't really go as much with the bigger personnel. They're probably going to have to go mostly 11 personnel in this game with TJ Hawkinson, and maybe sometimes with, I don't know, Ben Urasek has to go out there, or Nick Vannett. I mean, they really don't have any depth there beyond just TJ Hawkinson. So I think you're going to see a lot of 3 wide receivers, and we'll see about CJ Ham and his health. I mean, it's the injuries still, like, even though it's not Darisaw necessarily, still can play a role in this game. But I think that's why we're talking about get the ball out quickly, because, and it's just not a Vikings thing either. It's hard to just flip the switch and say, all right, you know what? Go from here's the root of your offense to something completely different. Like, it isn't a Madden playbook. They have a scheme that they build and they teach, and there's options within it, but it's not like you could just go hocus pocus, different offense. Like, it's just, this is not how it works. So, they have stuff for bigger personnel because of Josh Oliver, but they often run out of it. I'm not against it if Oliver's in, but the fact that he's out hurts that possibility. Mr. Mayor, why is this team so bad at tackling? How do they fix it? Seems like they need to bring in a rock climber or something to teach them grip strength exercises. Yeah, I don't know if that's it. That feels like something out of dodgeball or whatever. If you can dodge a wrench, you can tackle a running back. Don't know the answer to that question. I think it's probably player-based. I can look at who has the most missed tackles on the team so far this year, but I think Cam Bynum was a really good tackler, and, maybe I'm getting annoying from bringing up Cam Bynum repeatedly, but I think we all thought, hey, the safety position, maybe it's not one that you pay that much, but, I think they've missed him there. Eric Wilson is the team leader in missed tackles. I think we know this about Wilson. He's a good player, and I really like Eric Wilson, but I like him in the role that he's in, which is not asked to be Blake Cashman. And through the time he's asked to be Blake Cashman, that's a tough ask for a guy who was an undrafted free agent, kind of fought to be here through special teams. He's had opportunities before as a starter, but this is one of the issues, not the biggest guy. And when you have an undersized linebacker going up against good running backs, it could be tough. So he's number 1 there. Ivan Pace and his drop-off has been pretty shocking. And, linebackers and missed tackles are also determined by what's going on in front of them. Because if you have running backs coming through free, hey, I'm untouched until I get to the linebacker. Not guys who are sort of, I'm juking, slowing down, getting pulled down from behind, and then the linebacker comes in and helps with the tackle. But I'm one-on-one with you. A lot harder for linebackers to make tackles. So I think it kind of all affects each other. But Ivan Pace dropping off from being a guy that was an exciting young player to almost unplayable, or virtually unplayable in the last 2 games, really, really surprising. And that's reflected in that missed tackle stat. 15 missed tackles for Ivan Pace. Wow. And then, defensive linemen you kind of expect, like Jonathan Grenard is up there, but a lot of that's chasing quarterbacks. You would like to see him, get some more sacks, but his pressures have just been fantastic. That stuff is going to come at some point. Defensive linemen getting in the backfield, getting some of those. Metellus has 12 this year. Overall, his tackling grade is good though. Kind of speaks to the number of opportunities. So it's been a little bit of everything, but I really think that it starts up front. This is why it's funny. I remember when I met my wife, this is a nose tackle story. Now, right? Like, just going to tell you guys about true love here. So when I met my wife, her family had come from the Pittsburgh area. Like they had roots in Pittsburgh. So they had in as parts of her family, like longtime Pittsburgh Steelers fans. So when she was a kid, she grew up in Los Angeles. They went to a San Diego Chargers Pittsburgh Steelers game. And so she was watching the Steelers a lot and things like that, following them along, and so forth. And I remember saying to her on one of our first dates, again, like, this is who I am, folks. I said, you know who makes me emotional watching them play football is Casey Hampton. Like, man, that is incredible to me to watch Casey Hampton play football. Now, if you don't remember Casey Hampton, he was their defensive tackle for all those great defenses of the 2000s, the Ben Roethlisberger era. And I remember talking to Bryant McFadden, who was on those teams. He's Patrick Peterson's cousin. He's on CBS, and we were talking about it. And he just raved about Casey Hampton, which made me very happy. Because if you can take up two guys, if you can overpower centers and guards and they can't move you, it's much easier for linebackers to come in and make tackles. Because the running back is not hitting you at full speed. He's not hitting you clean. He's having to slow down, look for places to go and try to juke and try to move around and then accelerate quickly. And you could just come tackle him. And remember, they had all those great linebackers on those Pittsburgh teams. And look, you can use Pat Williams as an example for this too. And I don't think Harrison Phillips was Casey Hampton. I don't think Harrison Phillips was Pat Williams. But he and Jonathan Bullard kind of did that. They just held guys up. And they were like, all right, this is my job. And PFF's not going to love it. And it didn't. And the linebackers are all going to look better. And that's how defense works sometimes. And that's why, you can't just use grades to determine everything because there's impacts. So I think when you're talking about missed tackles, that not having run stuffers, like true gap fillers, true powerful guys up front, it's hurt them. And that was one of the bets that they made. They made a bet that they could play these two guys, Hargrave and Allen, a high percentage of the snaps, and that they'd be rushing the passer all day, and they haven't been. And when we look at this, it's kind of crazy. Javon Hargrave, even for example, he has only been on the field for 118 pass rush snaps and 96 run defense snaps. Jonathan Allen, it's 50-50. It's 170 to 151. Let me compare that to the rest of the league just to really make this point. And that's how you end up with the linebackers constantly in position where they're getting, run down their throat. So to make this point, Zach Allen of the Denver Broncos has been on the field for 263 pass rush snaps. That is first in the league, 263. Jonathan Allen is 35th in the league at 170. I mean, that's just... Oh, and by the way, Zach Allen has only been on the field for 135 runs. So Jonathan Allen has actually been on the field for more runs than Zach Allen, who has got 100 more chances to rush the passer. It's just, it's amazing how defense works like that, where it can just be so tricky to try to figure out. But man, like it tells you how the circumstances have impacted everything, including the linebacker grades and the missed tackles and all that sort of stuff. VA Vikings says Jordan Love sucks. Show your work. You're going to have to prove that. You're just going to have to prove that. I'm sorry that for the Vikings fans who wanted Jordan Love to be bad, because that's got to be irritating. He's not. Is he perfect though? No, he's not. But if JJ McCarthy plays like Jordan Love has this year, you guys will lose your minds. You'll tattoo JJ McCarthy's number on your face if he plays as well as Jordan Love this year. Love's been great. The Packers have built a great team. So have the Lions. And that's why I think that it feels crushing to have a lot of these bets, as we're talking about, go wrong. Now, if the Vikings can play from a lead if they do have more success offensively, you'll see those numbers change that we were just talking about on defense. BM says, didn't shock me that Darnold is good, but I'm floored that Daniel Jones is serviceable, let alone one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I totally agree with you. Totally agree. I never saw it coming. Now, I would have thought that he would win that job because Anthony Richardson was so bad. I thought, okay, well, I'm not shocked that Daniel Jones has won the job. He's a very smart player and had his moments. I mean, the guy won a playoff game and he was good in that one season and he's got athleticism. So like, hey, maybe they'll be like a 500 team. I didn't see that coming, but man, their offensive line is so good. You could see why they were ready to move on from Ryan Kelly and Will Fries because their offensive line is so good. They've got the MVP, I think, of the entire league in the backfield. That helps. And that's another point about how things affect each other. If you can run that well, then everything is there for you. And we'll see if I can find the stat on this about, the play action and Daniel Jones. Because I'm pretty sure that he is just crushing on play action, which does play off of the run game. Let's see. Daniel Jones has, number one in the NFL at 808 yards, 9.6 yards per attempt on play action, Daniel Jones. And 34% of the time, which is number one in the National Football League. So that really shows you, right, is when we try to judge quarterbacks that, okay, Mahomes, Allen, those guys, they're going to be good no matter what. But even like Jared Goff, who the Vikings are getting ready to play, when their team was tanking, Jared Goff's not that good. And when they couldn't block it up for Jared Goff in Los Angeles in his last year there, 2020, Jared Goff wasn't as good. If you could pressure him this week, he won't be as good. That's just how it is for Jared Goff. He has to have a running game to play off of. He has to have a screen game to play off of to be the best version of himself. But you want to see those things also set up for JJ McCarthy as well. But it just sort of ties into even a Daniel Jones, who is talented and is a first-round draft pick, but a Sam Darnold as well. Last year, he's got the best receivers. This year, they've got a really good receiver, a good offense. And if you've got the talent, you can make it work. And that's at least what we have here for the Vikings. At least what we have here is, I would say, a control. Call it a control, where the receivers can catch the ball, and the offense can work for good quarterbacks. If they can block it up, it can work. So if JJ McCarthy can't execute it at all, then it's not a Justin Jefferson issue. It's not a Jordan Addison issue. It's probably not even a KOC issue, though he will get destroyed for it. And look, it was his decision, in part, if not solely, to go this way with JJ McCarthy. So he's got to wear that one way or the other. But when last year Sam Darnold averages 8.5 yards per attempt and is in the MVP conversation through 17 weeks, or at least in the fringe of the MVP conversation, I think we know that a lot of it works. And his offensive line wasn't perfect either. To your point, who was it? Someone just made the point. I lost it. About 2.5 seconds. Because I had brought up that 2.5 second stat, and one of you that I lost the comment, sorry about that, mentioned like KOC's offense is not built for 2.5 seconds. You are right. Last year, Sam Darnold was only 21st in throws under 2.5 seconds, according to PFF. Now, the interesting part of that was he was top 10 in PFF grade in those throws, and he was number 2 in completion percentage. So when he did throw short, he was succeeding in doing so. And that was actually a Kirk thing too. That Kirk was in the top 10 in 2022 in terms of snap to release. It's not that you can't do it as part of this offense. I think it's something that with Sam Darnold, he loved to hang in and he loved to let routes develop. And I think McCarthy does the same thing. I think he understands the first read is down the field and he's going to look that way. And that is the case a lot with this offense. So can you still have those elements, but also dial it back and look at some of the stats this year about yards after catch that I showed earlier? They're telling a story that sitting in the pocket and throwing downfield is getting harder and harder. And this D-line has been playing really well. It's not going to let you do it. FanDuel question of the day, just if you're just joining. McCarthy on FanDuel, 212.5 yards is the over-under. What do you need to see from McCarthy to feel like it was a good game? Doesn't have to be statistical. That's what most folks have been answering here this evening, but everything on the table. I'm trying my best to keep up with all your great questions, and just want to say that you guys are doing a great job. I'm sorry I fall behind in the chat because I answer so many of them, but really, really great stuff tonight. BM says, I do feel somewhat bad about Turner criticism. Unless he becomes an all-pro, he won't live up to the draft position and cost. Bummer for him, but it is what it is. Yeah, I agree with you that drafting, if they draft, let's just say they drafted Dallas Turner, who becomes, I don't know, the guy who ranks 34th by PFF. Let's just say that. 40th, somewhere in that range. It's not enough to justify the draft. It's enough to help you win football games, which I remember talking about this when he was drafted. Like, we're going to do this thing again, aren't we? We're going to do this thing where forever, for this entire guy's life, we just hold it over his head. Here's what you were traded for. And that's a tough place to live for him, because if he becomes a top 50 player at his position, that can help you win for sure. It could be very useful, but it's not worth what they gave up. And that's the unfortunate part, because he had nothing to do with that. He didn't trade for himself. At the same time, I want to see him and Van Ginkel out on the field. I want to see the bigger sample of him and Van Ginkel playing together before we really know, because that's what he was supposed to do this year. And if instead of having to play 60 snaps where he's got to do absolutely everything, he could play 40 snaps that play to his strengths, I think that would be a lot better for Dallas Turner. It hasn't looked great so far. He's gotten some pressures. He hasn't looked good in coverage. He hasn't looked good against the run, setting the edge. But I think that there's, maybe still time there if they can get Van Ginkel back to see the version of Dallas Turner that we thought we were going to see. Jerry says Hutchinson versus Darisaw, the battle of the return. Does Hutchinson line up on that side, or does he line up more on the other side? I'll have to look what he's doing these days, because I think of Hutchinson as being a guy that lines up on the right side. Let me see. Isn't it great to have all these numbers where we could just say, hey, I wonder about it. Oh my goodness. He is, wow. Aiden Hutchinson this year, 48 pressures, 92.2 PFF grade. My gracious. That is a good football player. Let's see. Left end, right end. It's both. It looks like it's both, but it's a lot more over the left end, which is the right tackle. So Brian O'Neill's health is going to be huge. Well, actually, it looks like it's wow. This is really based on who he's facing off with. So if Justin School is playing, then he's going to be over him all day. But just 2 games ago, he lined up as the right defensive end 40 times and only 18 on the other side. It was about 50-50. Then this last game, it was all on the right side. That's really interesting. Or does he, here would be another idea for, like, does he take on the best tackle so it can be best versus best and the other guys get an advantage and they can get one-on-one? I don't know. That's interesting to think about, because if he's on that side, well, I guess Tristan Wirfs moved. Yeah, it looks like it's probably matchup based. What an animal. Hey, it's crazy how they hit on that draft pick, right? He was a 6th round pick, Aiden Hutchinson. Is that right? Oh yeah, they tanked. That's how they got him. Tanking has looked pretty good for the Detroit Lions. That's how they got Aiden Hutchinson, because he's an absolute monster. Bill says injuries to 9, 41, 43, 71, 75, and Kelly, whose number I can't remember either, tell the story of this year's team to date. I heard Pat Kerwin say a backup offensive linemen are garbage for every team. Well, Bill, I totally agree. And that's, when we were talking about that tension and things like that earlier, in a building in the NFL, they don't walk around and say, hey guys, just some backups. What can you do? Like that's not how it works, But if we're doing the entire autopsy of this team through 7 weeks and why they haven't been as good as we expected them to be, the number one reason is that they've just never been themselves. This could be the closest this week to them being their whole version. I think it will be, right? Yeah, no, this will be the first time that they have their starting quarterback their starting wide receivers, potentially if O'Neal plays, both starting tackles, and potentially if Van Ginkel plays, then most of their full defense. This will be the first time that they've even come close to that. The injuries have been absolutely crushing because they haven't just been like meh. They've been really, really good players who have been out. James says, is that Frock AI? What the heck is that? Gives us 25 to 30% chance to make the playoffs. Whatever AI you're using there, I don't think is telling the right number, which I guess AI misses a lot on stuff like that. Everything, actually. Right now, the odds on FanDuel for the Vikings to make the playoffs is plus 760. So someone can probably translate that to a percentage. Maybe it is 25% at plus 760. I don't interpret it that way. But if you look at the NFC teams ahead of them, the Falcons have a better chance. The Cowboys, the Commanders, and the Panthers are even at plus 520. And Arizona's right behind them at plus 1,300. It's not just what record they have to get to or how many wins. It's also how many teams are ahead of them, and then tiebreakers and things like that. There's a lot of teams ahead of them. If you're 12th and you need to get to 7th, that's a lot of teams that need to mess up, and you need to win a lot of games in order to get there. I would put it at much lower than 25%. I would put it at about 5% right now. Feel free to prove that wrong. I mean, if they win 3 games in a row, then we're going to change our tune. But as of right now, pretty tough to say. Skull 357 says Vegas says 4% to make the playoffs. Yeah, that's about right. That's much more close to how I would interpret it. VA Viking says don't like Jared Goff either. Is a stupid face. Yeah. I don't know. Really? Doesn't he look like that actor? I don't know, man. I would be shocked if your face looked nicer than Jared Goff's face. But I get being annoyed with Jared Goff being as good as he is. I'll read the rest of the comment. He's good to go against the blitz. Hope Flores doesn't do the same stuff against him this week. Dude can't run, play cover. Yeah, but when they play zones and don't blitz, the numbers for Jared Goff are astronomical. I mean, they're really astronomical versus almost anything, which is why he gets so much from me credit. But especially when he's clean, when he's not under pressure, he is as good as it gets. So it really is finding ways to pressure Jared Goff. Let's see. He hasn't been pressured, I don't think, a whole lot this year. Let's take a look. How often has Jared Goff been pressured this year? Might have to search this one. 29th in the league in terms of this is crazy. This is why they probably do it. Jared Goff has only been pressured 33% of the time, which is 29th, like in a good way, 29th, has a 30 PFF grade, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and only 50% completion percentage when he is under pressure. That is crazy. Now, pressure is a quarterback stat, so him getting rid of the football, that matters. When he is not under pressure, when he is clean, he has a 134.1 quarterback rating. 15 touchdowns, 1 pick, 8.6 yards per attempt. There's no player that has a bigger gap. So that's probably why they do it, is if you could get pressure on Goff, and the Vikings did this early in the Week 18 game, he will collapse. He will throw inaccurate. He will make mistakes. He's got a couple of interceptions. So I think what is so hard about doing that, though, is that he identifies the blitzes. And he identifies the vacancies in the defense and then just throws it. And so he's not under pressure very often because their line is good, but it's not flawless, and yet he just gets the ball out. Let's see. Freaker by the Speaker says KOC has never produced a run game, and everyone knows it. It's very true. They've been losing a lot. That matters. A stat that I found that was interesting is that Jordan Mason is 9th in success rate in rushing this year, 54.7% success rate. So that's pretty good. The opportunity to run just hasn't really been there. I mean, when you're giving up points. So I think they've produced a run game this year that can have success if they're allowed to get to it. But they might need to stick with that regardless, with JJ McCarthy in there, regardless of what the score is. If you're down 14, you have to keep running. And that's something that I don't know we've ever seen KOC do. And you're right. They have not gotten to the point where they have ever proven that someone should be afraid of their run game consistently. The first 8 weeks last year was pretty good, but not consistently. Let's see. Mr. Dizzle says KOC's a terrible play caller. Let's talk about his third down conversion rate. Look up that percentage. Well, are we looking up that percentage for this year or last year? Because this is always my problem when people say, well, he's a terrible play caller. And I wonder, well, what happened last year? Like, did he use the good plays? Let's take a look last year. They were 12th last year in third down conversion percentage, 40% last year. So that's pretty good. I mean, every time it comes up, it's like, well, with a backup quarterback in there, the play caller looks bad, especially a backup quarterback that needed immediate surgery after the game. So, that's where it gets tough for me to say that. But you know what I do think though, that over this next 10 games, we're going to see how his offense fits with JJ McCarthy. Is that fair? For all of those who kind of want to say, and I always say, hey, and I'll give you credit for the comment there, is what I always say is you got to be specific. You got to tell me what it is that's bothering you about the play calling. You can't just yell play calling because when we look back at 2023, 2022, 2024, like when Kirk is playing, when Darnold's playing, there's a lot of good play calling all of a sudden. And then when Wentz is playing or Dobbs, then it's not good play calling. Well, okay. I mean, that kind of correlates pretty well with, did they have a quarterback who was even playable in the NFL, right? So that's so I credit you for the specific there, but last year they were still good at converting third downs, or at least above average. So I'm not sure that's like the smoking gun there. But I think that the connection between McCarthy and KOC, can he create an offense that works for McCarthy? Does he feel comfortable with it? Does it look like he can handle it? Does he pare it down to the right things? Does he get him working with play action? Does he have him playing on time? Like, if you can make that progress, I think it will say a lot about the whispering of the quarterback and what that connection can be like into the future. There's really no such thing as any person who can just go hocus pocus, whatever. I'm trying to use Halloween things, but that's the only one I got. Wave the magic wand and go, and you are a great quarterback. And I think that people treated it that way with Darnold last year and left out that Darnold had developed a ton from the absolute garbage pile teams he had been with. And so was it KOC? Yes, there was some of that. Was it Jefferson? Yes, there was a lot of that. Was it Addison? Yes, there was a lot of that. And was it Darnold? Yes, that his personal development and his raw talent, which is absolutely out of this world, all of it played into his success last year. And I think, maybe if you were doing the pie chart, well, Darnold is number one for me by far for who deserves the most credit. But I think outside it was like, oh, KOC did it. He just did it. So now just do it again. And maybe he believed that too. And you should never as a coach believe that it's you, because can be you for some ways and you can help a lot. But it's always going to be the player and the players that you can put around that person. So if he can create a cadence within those two, or whatever you want to call it, connection, chemistry, the quarterback is understanding you and you're understanding them, but that takes a little bit of time. And I don't know if you could do that this weekend against Detroit and just have it click, but certainly as you go along, that's what we want to see. Like, it's one of those boxes that they really need to check. So let's see. Zoomer Kev, when are we doing Titans night with Maggie? Needs for next year is you're naming everything. Yeah, I know. Poor Maggie, special contributor. She's on the episode earlier today that I ran with Chris Trapasso looking at the draft. She grew up in Tennessee. It's been a rough ride for her there recently. Let's see. KFT Vikings might need to draft a couple offensive line next year to create quality depth. It kind of goes back to no one has quality depth. They drafted Juergens. They drafted Rouse. I think Rouse has been okay. I think there's potential there for him. they're going to need a center. That is for sure, that they don't have their long-term center, I think, on the roster. I think Juergens could be a backup swing guy, but probably not a starter. So they do have to find that at some point. But let's talk about next year when we really have to, because we're going to have a lot of time to talk about next year. That's for sure. We will have a lot of time, I'm guessing in January, to break these things down, unless they, turn it around. But it's just too far behind for me to start having that discussion. KFT says KOC is kind of like Norv Turner, doesn't like to deviate from his norm, even when absolutely necessary. Well, so I think that we saw them do that a bit against Cleveland, and we saw him do it a bit against Philadelphia, and it worked. But I also feel that way, that this offense, to work at its maximum, and look, you could say this about KOC. I think it's also true in some ways about Sean McVay, that the reason they moved on from Jared Goff was Sean McVay wanted to have a quarterback who had the arm talent to do all the things that he had dreamed up in his brain. And then they went and found him in Matthew Stafford. But the narrative's different if they found the guy and it works, right? And the same thing goes for Darnold. Like, he dreamed up all these amazing routes down the field that defenses can't cover, and then Darnold could throw it. And that was why last year we talked about the potential of sticking with Darnold, because it was like, this is the arm that you're looking for. But I don't want to discount that JJ McCarthy has the arm to make the throws. I think he has the velocity to make the throws. But arm talent is also about touch, timing. I mean, the smooth delivery that Sam Darnold has, the accuracy that Matthew Stafford has, like, those things take a long time to get down, and how far McCarthy can come with that, that's where adjustments might need to be made. It's kind of interesting you bring that up, because there's even a funny little bit of Norv at the end of his career, where he goes to Carolina, and the first 6 or 7 games before Cam Newton severely hurts his shoulder, and that just takes him kind of out for the rest of his career, Norv was actually dialing up quick game, and it was working. So even if Norv Turner could change, it's like at the end of Rocky IV. If I can change, then KOC can change. We'll see. I like a lot of the things they did against Cleveland and Philadelphia. Just schematically, looking at the film, guys were open, underneath stuff was there. So I think there was some adaptation there. Rob says the interior D-line has created pressure. Redmond with 3 sacks, Allen Hargrave 2 sacks, Ingram Dawkins with 1. I think that's twice as much as the D-line had last year. It is, but has it been enough? But I think, to your point, like, the pass rush win rates aren't terrible. You got to be out there for pass rush, which means you have to stop the run, which means your offense has to not put you, like, we've been through this kind of over and over, but you're right that they have had success in doing it and in creating pressure when they've had the opportunities, but it just hasn't had the impact that they hoped it was going to have. Let's see. Steven says the Chargers game was a must win. If there was any hope of the postseason, that train left the station real quick on Thursday Night Football. Now it's hoping McCarthy looks good. Yep, 100%. Yep, I felt the same way. And we spent kind of those couple of days cramming in these conversations and having that talk about, hey, win this game, get to 4-3, you're in the race, you're in the competition, it's not over. And at 3-4, it's you're far from the competition now with so many good teams. Skull 357, no reason to let, I assume you mean Kwesi, drafted 2026 with a potential top 5-10 pick, has shown zero ability to nail the picks. The Wilfs know that. The Wilfs had to pay $100 million on free agents. The draft picks that they've had. Now, should they have traded down in 2022? I think the answer is obviously no. But the draft picks that they've had have been, off the top of my head, somewhere in the ballpark of 32nd, talking about high picks, 32nd, 21st, 23rd. And what was Turner, 17th? And of course, JJ McCarthy is 10th. That's a quarterback. It's a different story. They haven't had high draft picks. Now, they decided to forego having one in 2022. That was not my preference at the time, if you recall, because my argument was Hall of Famers get drafted in the top 15. So That's the guys who drive your success, and you should probably just stick and pick, but didn't happen. If you're picking 32nd, 23rd, I mean, the fact that they've even gotten Donovan Jackson, who I think looks good, and Jordan Addison is very good, and at least Dallas Turner is a guy that you can play. Like, okay, I mean, that's about what you can expect. If you don't have high draft picks, it's really hard to find Aiden Hutchinson, because Aiden Hutchinson only goes second overall. He doesn't go 17th or 23rd. Even finding a Darisaw and a Jefferson is pretty shocking. Not having taken those guys high, or even a Jordan Addison, players that good, is pretty surprising. When you look at the history of once you get past the top 15, it is super hit or miss. So having a high draft pick to start with, I don't think that they have enough sample size of draft picks to just say, take the keys away from the guy. Don't ever let him get near a draft pick. Also, I just am, this is going to be, you're going to hear me say it too many times, and I apologize in advance. You can't tell me that Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah just has his computer alone in a closet and makes the draft picks. It is a full team effort. So if you're saying don't let him do it, well, don't let KOC, don't let Brian Flores, don't let the scouting set. You have to blow out everybody. Just don't let anybody near any draft picks on this team, because they're all involved in making these picks. But when it's a hit, it's Addison, and then it's KOC did it. But when it's a miss, it's Kwesi did it. I already know this. This is how it goes. But I mean, you're basically just saying, like, fire everyone then. If you don't think that this organization can make a top draft pick, you're saying fire everyone. And that, to me, is not where I'm at with this team. I think that they have drafted okay with relative to the high picks in fact, even relative to the overall picks that they've had. It's really only 2022 where everything went wrong. But the rest of them just haven't had a lot of picks. This is the year to accumulate as many picks as you can. And yeah, I mean, maybe it's a trade back. I don't know. They need to accumulate draft picks and make picks to have a better chance to hit on them. Because if you only have 8 top 100 picks in 4 years, you're not going to do very well. I can guarantee that. There is no team that has taken that few top 100 picks and just nailed all of them. No chance. So, let's see. First name, last name says, don't think it's a good play call, bad play call thing with KOC. It's that KOC probably expects too much and should be trying to simplify things. That's where I'm saying that Philadelphia and Cleveland, I thought that he did that. But you're right. I mean, if you put, it's a balance. If you don't put anything on JJ McCarthy's plate, he's not going to have an offense that he can succeed with, because it's not going to be to the standard of the NFL. We've seen college guys come in before, run these half-baked offenses that worked in college, and it just doesn't work. So you need a full NFL playbook to succeed against NFL defenses, but you also don't have to make it so complex that only Matthew Stafford can run it. At the same time, Sam Darnold was not thought of as to be a quarterback on that level and was able to get it down. So experience does matter, though. Experience does matter when it comes to how complex you can make this offense. You have to pare it down. I would also maybe reject the idea that they didn't try in those first 2 games. He just didn't throw any passes. I mean, if you're talking about making that judgment on 50-something dropbacks over 2 games, I'm just not really sure. I just think every time something doesn't work, then we always say the play caller is dumb. And if it works, we say, good job, player. Or you're a quarterback whisperer, I guess. KFT, Van Ginkel is the engine that makes the defense go, makes a huge difference. Totally agree. Thank you guys, by the way, for all the great answers for the FanDuel question of the day. The over-under on McCarthy, 212.5. And what are you looking for in this game from him? Is CJ Ham playing? Well, let's see. Let me take a look at what that injury report said. He was not practicing on the injury report today. That doesn't seem good for CJ Ham. Not practicing today. Two Dog Dad said, I thought Dallas Turner was supposed to be like a defensive lineman, linebacker, safety type. I don't think safety was ever in the mix. So far, he's not really excelling in any of those categories. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Andrew Van Ginkel is such a unique guy. There are very few. Look, if there were a lot of Andrew Van Ginkels. If a lot of people could do it, then you would just have them everywhere. Players that dynamic. I don't think he's that guy. I think what he needs to be doing is just rushing the passer every play. He needs to be in more often on pass downs than run downs, mix and match maybe at where he's at. But I think he just needs to be rushing off the edge all the time. And trying to make him into Andrew Van Ginkel is either going to take a really long time because Van Ginkel didn't become this version until several years into his career, or it's just not going to work because that might not be who he is. He might just have to be a situational edge rusher to get the most out of him. That might have to be how it goes for Dallas Turner. But I think making him into Andrew Van Ginkel because of an injury has not really given us as much as we needed to see from Dallas Turner because he's been playing over his head. I mean, even when we look at, we are talking about a guy who is what? Is he 23 yet? I don't think he's 23 yet. And we always want everybody to be the full version of themselves. Let's see. He is still 22. And he's had to play 65 snaps, 53 snaps, 53 snaps, 60 snaps. It's just a lot. Now, I think his game against the Chargers was atrocious, like absolutely awful when it came to tackling, run defense, consistent pass rush. He got a handful of pressures, but I just, the penalty, I thought it was awful. It was probably the worst game we've seen him play. Previous to that, I thought that there was some stuff to really build on in games before that, but it still feels like it's in the phase where we haven't really gotten to see it. And that is a theme with a lot of these guys. Just feels like we haven't gotten to see it. Haven't gotten to see Jonathan Allen chase the passer when there's other guys who have done it 100 more times than him so far this year. And instead, he's kind of in there just having to stop runs and stuff. So, Okay, this is funny, Jerry. Dobbs had a great game with no playbook. Have McCarthy call his own plays in the huddle like it's 1960. That would be fun. That would be fun if they did that. I don't think it would work at all, but maybe, I don't know, it'd be different. The Dobbs thing, we also have to remember in the Josh Dobbs game that he beat Taylor Heineke. It wasn't exactly like he took down Peyton Manning in that game. Let's see. KFT says, Matthew can't agree on the Vikings drafts. They need to hit, when there aren't a lot of draft picks, it's their own fault. You can't give away picks and then say we didn't have a lot of picks. You can. Because giving away the picks doesn't have to be like the greatest idea. I'm not saying like, oh, wow, they nailed it on all the reasons they gave away picks, right? It is absolutely an explanation for them why they don't have a lot of hits, that they don't have a lot of picks. That's not to say it was all the right idea or that it worked out great or that it was right to do. But it's obvious that that's one of the reasons. If you have twice as many shots at it and higher draft picks, if you're Detroit, you're going to get more hits. I mean, it's just a math issue of there are certain percentages for every hit. If you have 8 picks in the top 100 and none of them are in the top 15, what is your percentage to hit? It's not going to be very high, that you just crush it. Now, if what you're talking about, I think, is if they should have had a different philosophy from the outset. Now, that I would agree with. But I thought that they did as well as you could do. Now, this is coming off of 14 wins and giving them a lot of benefit of the doubt that they did as well as you can do for a competitive rebuild because that's what the ownership wanted. As we go into a game, this is the thing, right? Like, this should be the told you so game for me. The team that tanked, who just signed their biggest players that they got from tanking, Penei Sewell and Aiden Hutchinson. Jahmyr Gibbs is crushing it. Like, that was my idea in 2022. Go to the bottom, tank, get all the draft picks. And it was Kwesi's idea to trade down and try to get more picks in 2022 and take more shots at it. That didn't work out. And I think that scared them. I think that right there was, and Kwesi could say all day that, hey, I was trying to fill every need like in my first draft and so forth. When you look back at that draft, it wasn't a great one in any of the areas that they took players. Yes, Kyle Hamilton, It's a couple other players who have turned out really well, but not that many. And when you get into the second round, it's very, very bare in the second round of that draft. Didn't work out for a lot of teams, but it's so much more crushing when you trade back, you miss on a couple of players that turned out to be really good, and then your guy just doesn't even play at all and is horrendous like that, and then has this horrible injury early in his career. Like, it just, there's been a lot of bad luck to go along with these things too. But I think that that's closer to the right idea, is to stack picks. I don't ever agree with moving out of the top 15 just because of the history there, but trying to stack as many picks as you can is generally the right idea. But what they were doing here, filling this roster with free agents, last year they look brilliant and it works. This year they look stupid when it doesn't, and that's just kind of football and how it goes. And we can second guess everything. I think what we try to separate though when you do the criticism is, which one of these things did you see the potential downside of it from the outset and say, we're throwing caution to the wind? That's like a Jonathan Allen signing to me. I remember being asked about it at the combine. Hey, do you want him to get Jonathan Allen? I was like, oh, very hesitant about that based on how he's recently played. And then the money that they gave him, same sort of deal. Like, well, he's going to have to play really well to justify it. And I know he gets pointed at a lot because he's the guy that they spent so much on. That's life. But that's an example of how you could go. I'm not sure at the time that this is the way to go. The secondary is a great example of all through training camp. We're going, Rodgers looks pretty good. And maybe Okuda, there's a thing here, but I'm pretty skeptical on that. And then you miss on all of it that you could have seen coming throughout this offseason. You don't bring Shaq Griffin back when he's on a practice squad. And I'm not fully sure I understand that. Some of the draft things that they've done to trade away so many draft picks, I think at the time that, well, if you're going to do that, you better hit on what comes back, the trades, the free agents, and you're unlikely to get a lot of success in the draft. So what they did was they tried to create a 2 to 3 year window here with all these players who are in their primes rather than trying to develop people over a long period of time. They're trying to hit the mark on JJ McCarthy. Now, here's the thing about the NFL. You can quickly go from, holy bleep, you messed up everything, my gosh, what's wrong with you, to, oh yeah, it all worked. That's like 2016 to 2017. Biggest difference was that nobody got hurt except for the quarterback in 2017. But in 2016, we left saying, wow, they messed up so many different things. They have no line. They, missed on this draft pick and that draft pick. Laquan Treadwell, Mackenzie Alexander, what are they doing? And we were crushing them for that entire offseason. Then the next year, guys stayed healthy. They played well, and all of a sudden it looked good. So I don't think that the book is written on the entire roster build as bad as it looks right now. But that means that there's a ton of pressure for the next offseason, assuming that it continues to go this way. We are only 7 games in, and this could feel a lot different later on because we've rightfully decided that the chance of the playoffs is over, but the season is not over. So there is a ways to go for that. Let's see. So that's kind of how I look at it, is like there's still a lot of these things to be determined. Steven says TJ's contract will hinder any value coming back to the Vikings. Who's going to give up anything for a guy with a bad post-injury stats that has large base salary dollars left on his contract? I tend to agree that it would be a hard one to trade based on the salary. That would make it difficult. There's not a lot of teams. Who was it? Maybe Field Yates tweeted out today, or someone, who has X number of cap space left. It's not much. So you'd have to shuffle things around and figure it out. And I don't think that there's going to be teams that are lining up. Now, maybe if you're trying to dump the contract and you're taking a 5th round pick for it, that's possible that they could do something like that. So, look, you guys bring up Cam Skattebo in the draft, like a fun running back who's just okay. Like, I don't know. It's not something that I look at and go, oh my God, how did you not draft that guy? I would rather still have a wide receiver that I think has potential, because as fun as Cam Scadaboo is, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of running backs that are of that caliber. So I'm just not too concerned about that. But as far as the trading Hockenson idea, I think it's just going to be hard to find suitors who want to do it. If you can, then it would make sense to do so. But also, I would like to see TJ Hockenson play with JJ McCarthy for 10 games. Let's see that and decide where we're at. Because he hasn't played as well with Darnold as he did with Kirk. We understood why that was. This year, when they've thrown the ball, he's been fairly effective. Now, is it any more effective than any other tight end? Is it worth the money? No. And they do need the cap space going forward. So if someone's willing to do it, they have to listen to that conversation. But that might have to just be an off-season thing. You're not getting anything for him at this point other than just cap space. So that will be interesting to see if they try to become sellers here if they lose to the Detroit Lions. All right. Fun stuff. Great conversation, guys. I really appreciate it. And in the comments, if you guys want to answer that FanDuel question of the day about McCarthy over under 212.5, but what is the thing you want to see from McCarthy against Detroit tomorrow? We'll be back with Manny Hill. We're going to pick the Vikings schedule, and that could get real interesting from Manny. Also, Nolan Bianchi of the Detroit News. We talked today, and we'll bring you that interview tomorrow. And also keep your eyes out for that breakdown. Two of them. One of them with Chris Trapasso, draft analyst, where we talked about the draft, and we went into great detail of everything that's happened and what could still happen in the draft for the Vikings. And then a great analysis from Cody Alexander tomorrow. Make sure you check that out on the YouTube channel. So thanks, everybody, for the really good discussion here tonight. A lot going on in Viking land, but here's what I'll say to close. I totally agree with JJ McCarthy. This is a reset button. So even though things have gone wrong and there's a lot to criticize, a lot to analyze, at very least leading into this game, and I'll be flying out to Detroit on Saturday, a lot of different energy if things look good for JJ McCarthy. So it's become maybe not competitive as we thought it was going to be, but fascinating. Oh yeah. Very fascinating. So we'll catch you all tomorrow.